Hello guys. In this video lecture we are going to learn about anatomy and physiology of reproductive system. Reproductive system means a system which helps in the production of offsprings. It's called as a reproductive system, which is a very important system of our body. And sexual reproduction occurs by a process in which organism produces germ cells called as gametes. And in this, both males and females are present, in which produces males produces male gametes, whereas female produces female gametes. Male and female gametes both together fertilize, and females helps in the growth of the embryo and fetus. And the male and reproductive systems both together works to produce an offspring. So here the gynecology is the science, discipline of the science which helps in the study of diagnosis and study treatment of diseases related to female reproductive system, whereas andrology for male reproductive system. And this particular male and female reproductive system are separate organs. They are grouped into different types, different groups by means of function, like gonads, which helps in the production of male or female gametes. So those are like testes and ovaries in case of females, and ducts, which helps in the movement or transport of gametes into the respective organs, and axillary sex glands, which helps in the production of some sort of sexual hormones or some sort of sexual secretions, which helps in the protection and transport of gametes. And coming to the male reproductive system, the organs which includes gonads are nothing but testes. Gonads are nothing but testes, and a system of ducts which includes epididymis, ductus deferens, ejaculatory ducts, and urethra. Axillary glands like seminal vesicles, prostate glands, and bulbourethral glands. And also several supporting structures which includes scrotum and the penis. Scrotum. The scrotum is the supporting structure of the testis, which we need to study about it. Scrotum, which consists of a loose skin underlying the subcutaneous layer that hangs from the root of the penis, which it consists of a middle line or middle ridge. We call it as a raphe, which helps in the external division into two sacs, sacs, which each contains a single testis, and it consists of bundles of smooth muscles. We call them as dartus muscles, and it also consists of skeletal muscles, series of small bands of skeletal muscles. We call them as cremaster muscles. Dartus muscles helps in the movement of testis from inside to outside of within the scrotal sacs, whereas cremaster muscles helps in the movement of testis in and out of the body by means of through inguinal canals. And normal sperm production, which is produced below the 2 to 3 degrees below the core body temperature. Coming to testes or testicles are a pair of oval glands which helps in the production of sperm cells. A testis which is lined by means of a serous membrane. Serous membrane means which is completely filled with having or vascularized membrane. We call it a serous membrane called as tunica vaginalis. And this tunica vaginalis, if there is any collection of serous fluid which is filtered out from blood, and we call it as if there is any accumulation of that particular fluid into tunica vaginalis, then we call it as a hydrocele condition. So after the tunica vaginalis, there is a layer of fibrous capsule, white fibrous capsule. We call it as tunica albuginea. Which further innervates or invaginates to form lobes, or divides the testis into lobules. And in lobules there are tubule-like structures called as seminiferous tubules, which helps in the production of sperm cells. So into the uh, testis, spermatogenic cells, there are some cells. I mean, seminiferous tubules. There are some cells called as Sertoli cells, which are present at the basement of the membrane. Here we can see the pink color layer. One outermost layer is called as tunica vaginalis, and after that there is another layer. A white color layer is called as tunica albuginea, which enters into or invaginates into the testis, leads to the formation of lobes and lobules, and in each lobule there are about 4 to 5 seminiferous tubules. And seminiferous tubules, which are surrounded by means of, it has Sertoli cells, which are present in the basement membrane of the lumen of the each tubule. So internal to the basement membrane there are spermatogonia, which forms and tight junctions joining these Sertoli cells helps in the formation of blood testis barriers. Blood testis barriers a tight junction, which prevents the movement of unnecessary chemicals or cells or proteins to come enter into the testis, which may damage the formation of sperm cells. And the adjacent spaces between seminiferous tubules, which has a cluster of cells called as Leydig cells, which helps in the production of a male hormone called as testosterone. So here we can see these are the Leydig cells, and this is the blood vessel, and this is the basement membrane of the uh, seminiferous tubule, and in that we can see this spermatogonium. This is the spermatogonium, and the spermatogonium is surrounded by means of Sertoli cells. These are all Sertoli cells, and these Sertoli cells forms tight junctions, and these are sperm cells which are present into the core of the seminiferous tubule. Coming to the sperm, and coming to the sperm, each day there will be about 300 million sperms will complete the process of spermatogenesis. And a sperm is a major reproductive gamete which helps in the production of an offspring. So it has a major parts like head and tail. You will see this is the head, and this is the tail. And this is the middle piece. So the flattened pointed end of the head, which consists of nucleus which consists of 23 chromosomes, highly condensed chromosomes. And there is a tapered covering called as acrosome, which helps in the movement of penetration of the sperm into the ova. And tail, which is divided into 4 parts: neck, middle piece, and the tail, principal piece, and the end piece. And this helps in the this is the gap, means it has a longer tail. So here this tail helps in the movement of sperm cell. And the middle piece, which consists of mitochondria, and this mitochondria cannot enter into the ovum, since offspring doesn't have mitochondria derived from males, means the offsprings doesn't have mitochondria from fathers, they have mitochondria from mothers, since the mitochondria in the sperm is left outside. And the principal piece is the longest piece, and the end piece is a small terminal tapering point, which helps in the movement of sperm cell towards the ova. Coming to the ducts, of the ducts in the males. Ducts they are of ducts of the male reproductive system, like the ducts of the testis. We'll study up the ducts of the testis. Testis, which is consists of tubes, we call them as seminiferous tubules. These seminiferous tubules usually they are coiled structures which they become into series of very small straight ducts called as straight tubules. Means when the sperm is formed from the seminiferous tubules, it directly enters into the straight tubules. These straight tubules lead to or forms to a network of ducts. We call them as retitestis. From the retitestis, they form into a series of coiled ducts called as efferent ducts, which are present in the epidermis, that helps in the movement of sperms into epidermis. And then later, it is called as ductus epidermis. And the epidermis is the longest comma-shaped structure which lies along with the posterior border of the testis. And this epidermis, which it has, which is nothing but a tightly coiled ductus epidermis. And this epidermis helps in the storage of sperm cells, where maturation of sperm cells occurs or capacitation of sperm cells occurs even sometimes. And ductus deferens are also called as vas deferens, which is the duct coming out of the ductus epidermis. And the enlarged portion where the epidermis, where the ductus deferens leaves the epidermis, is called as ampulla. Spermatic cord is the supporting structure of the male reproductive system, which ascends out of the scrotum. Means from it starts from scrotum, and this spermatic cord holds a testicular artery and vein that carries blood circulation, that maintains blood circulation to this testis, and autonomic nerves, and also cremaster muscle, a skeletal muscle, altogether called as spermatic cord. It takes the vas deferens out of the testis. And lastly, ejaculatory ducts, which are a common urogenital ductal tract after the vas deferens. And urethra is the terminal duct of the reproductive system, which is common tract for both urinary system and reproductive system. Here we can see the ducts, different ducts of the male, ducts in the males. So this is the ductus deferens or vas deferens, and this is the ampulla of the vas deferens, and this is the, of course, seminal vesicles, and here that forms the ejaculatory ducts, and then the common urogenital duct. Accessory sex glands. Accessory sex glands are seminal vesicles, prostate glands, and bulbourethral glands. Seminal glands, which produces major portion of the semen. It is present at the base of the urinary bladder and anterior to the rectum. Through seminal vesicles, it produces a sort of alkaline viscous fluid which contains fructose for providing substrate for the sperm cells to get energy, prostaglandins, and clotting proteins. If the semen is secreted outside the body for a few minutes, after a few minutes it clots. Means the clotting proteins helps in the clotting and denaturation of the semen. whereas the prostaglandins helps in the movements of sperm cells. So 60% of the entire semen volume of the semen constituted by the fluid secreted by seminal vesicles. So hence the secretion is altogether called as a semen. And next one is prostate gland. Prostate gland is a small sized donut shaped structure which surrounds the uh, urinary bladder, which end of the urinary bladder. This prostate gland secretes a slight milky substance, milky slightly acidic fluid, and this acidic fluid helps in the citric acid, acidic fluid which has citric acid, which helps in the production of ATP via Krebs cycles. And there are some proteolytic enzymes like prostate-specific antigens, pepsinogen, lysogen, amylase, hyaluronic acid, which all helps in the breakdown of clotting proteins as well as the bacteria inside the vagina. And it is also produces some sort of acid phosphatase, which function is of unknown. And seminal plasmin is the in plastic prostatic fluid acts as antibiotic and which destroys the bacteria. And bulbourethral glands are also called as Cowper's glands, which are present at the base of the penis, spongy urethra, and it helps during the sexual arousal. It secretes some sort of alkaline fluid, which which lubricates the penis, and also neutralizes the acids present in the urine, so that sperm will healthy sperm will come out of the body. The pH of the urine doesn't affect it. It takes care of the pH of the urine that doesn't affect that will not affect the sperm cells. And semen is a mixture of sperm and seminal fluid with prostatic fluids and bulbourethral fluids. The volume of semen is typically ejaculation in a typical ejaculation is 2.5 to 5 milliliters, and with 50 to 150 million sperm cells per ml. It's a normal value. And despite of the slightly acidity of prostatic fluid, semen has a slightly alkaline pH, and this is because of the larger volume of the fluid from seminal vesicles. And after passing through the uterus, the uterine tube, the sperm are affected by the secretions of uterine tube, and the process is called as a capacitation. And sometimes we can see blood in the sperm or semen. We call it as hemospermia. If there are large number of sperms, then we call it as oligospermia. Then coming to the another axillary structure called as penis. Penis, which consists of three muscles, a paired muscle and a single muscle, and it consists of urethra, a passageway for both semen and also the urine. The cylindrical shaped body. It consists of cylindrical shaped body and a glans penis and a root. The body of the penis, which is composed of three cylindrical masses, which are surrounded by means of fibrous tissue called as a tunica albuginea, and the two dorsolateral means which are present on the above the penis, which are called as corpora cavernosa, and the middle one is called as corpus spongiosum, which consists of spongy urethra, which keeps it open during the ejaculation. The skin and subcutaneous layer enclose the three masses of this particular erectile tissue, and this erectile tissue means corpus spongiosum, which consists of large spaces of blood sinuses, which are surrounded by means of smooth muscles and elastic connective tissue. The distal end of the corpus spongiosum, which are slightly enlarged and acorn shaped, which we call it as a glans penis. The distal part of the urethra enlarges within the glans penis and forms a terminal slit like opening, and we call it as external urethral orifice. The covering of the glans penis In uncircumcised is a loose fitting of foreskin called as prepuce. Usually, it is removed in some religious practices called as circumcision. The root of the penis is attached to the proximal portion of the um, body, and the bulb of the penis, it consists of bulb of the penis, which is the expanded portion of the corpus spongiosum, and the crura of penis. They are two separated and tapered portions of the corpus cavernosa penis. They are attached to the body by means of ligaments like fundiform ligament and suspensory ligaments. Coming to spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis usually takes around 65 to 75 days. So it starts from spermatogonia, which are diploid in number. We call it as germinal cells. So germinal cells to germ cells. So how that takes place? So these germinal cells are spermatogonia, which are in diploid condition. We also call it as from spermatogonia, or there will be a diploid by mitotic division. There will be diploid cells. We call it as primary spermatocytes, which undergoes into meiotic division. Meiotic division leads to the formation of meiotic 1 division leads to the formation of secondary spermatocytes, which are having 4 haploid cells resulting from the meiosis 2. And the final stage of spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis is the development of haploid spermatids into sperm. So those 4 haploid cells resulting after the 4 meiosis 2 are spermatids, which has transplasmic connections, bridges between each cell. So only we call it as spermatids. Later, the sperm cells are released from the connections of Sertoli cells, and this is called as spermiation. Coming to the hormonal control of the testis. Hypothalamus, which releases GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, and this acts on anterior pituitary to produce the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone acts on testis to release spermatogonia, acts on the spermatogenic cells to produce sperm cells, and luteinizing hormone acts on Leydig cells, which produces a male hormone called as testosterone. Testosterone helps in the production of secondary and primary sexual characters. When there is increased testosterone, then automatically it sends it produces the Sertoli cells produces a hormone called as inhibin, which inhibits the production of FSH. Whereas increased testosterone helps in the feedback loop, which creates a feedback loop which stops the production of LH. And also the presence of luteinizing hormone and GnRH increase those levels, which it inhibits the gonadotropin releasing hormone. Coming to female reproductive system. And the female reproductive system consists of same ways organs, gonads called ovaries, tubes like oviducts and fallopian tubes. Fallopian tubes are oviducts, and axillary organs like uterus and vagina, and glands. Ovaries. Ovaries are the producers of eggs. Female gonads, which are paired glands, which are present on either side of the uterus, and this produces gametes, secondary oocytes, which are developed into ova, mature ova after fertilization. And it also produces hormones like progesterone and estrogen, inhibin and relaxin. And there are a series of ligaments which holds them in position are broad ligament, ovarian ligament and suspensory ligament. Ovaries, which consists of germinal epithelium. This is the germinal epithelium, outermost layer, which produces germ cells. whereas the second layer is called as tunica albuginea, which is a dense fibrous connective tissue, dense fibrous tissue, which is called as uh, tunica albuginea, which forms the covering layer of the ovaries. And the ovarian cortex means the central part of the ovary. I mean the outermost layer of, I mean outermost part of the ovary, which is called as ovarian cortex, which consists of follicles and stromal cells. Follicles means the graphene follicles are the primary ovarian follicles, which we later see in the production of ova or oogenesis. And the Sertoli cells, which helps in the production of some sort of hormones like inhibin, estrogen, etc. And the ovarian medulla, which consists of oocytes. Here, this is the ovarian medulla, which consists of oocytes and follicular cells, granulosa cells, etc. And the mature graphene follicle also can be seen here. This is mature graphene follicle, and this is the corpus luteum, and then later it becomes corpus albicans. Uterine tubes. Uterine tubes, there will be two uterine tubes or oviducts. We call them as fallopian tubes. So fallopian tubes has a starting part called as infundibulum of the uterus tube, and it has a starting point called as fimbriae, finger-like structures called as fimbriae, which is opened, which has ampullae, means a wide opening structure. Here it is the ampullae, infundibulum and then ampullae, and then it receives the ova into it, and it consists of three layers of the three layers of the mucosa, the epithelium, which is mucosa, which is consists of epithelium, ciliated simple cells, columnar cells, and non-ciliated cells called as PEG cells. This cilia helps in the movement of ova into the uterus, fertilized egg and ova into the tubes and then uterus. And the later one is called as, in mucus there is another layer called as lamina propria. Lamina propria, which is a connective tissue, areola connective tissue, helps in the connection of this particular primary mucosa to the muscularis. Muscularis, which consists of smooth muscles, which helps in the movements of oviduct. And the last one is called as serosa, a serous layer surrounding the uterine tubes. Coming to the uterus is the receptacle of fertilized egg, and this uterus consists of three parts, mainly fundus, body, and cervix. So this is the fundus, body, and cervix. The isthmus, which opens into the uterus, into the cavity called as uterine cavity, and the inferior one is called a cervical canal, which is opened by means of external orifice and internal orifice. And this particular uterus consists of three layers called as perimetrium, outermost layer called as perimetrium, which is simple squamous epithelium and areola connective tissue. Laterally it was attached to broad ligament, anteriorly with vesco-uterine pouch, and posteriorly by means of recto-uterine pouch. And the myometrium, which consists of three layers. The thick middle layer is circular. Inner and outer layers are longitudinal or oblique layers of the skeletal muscles. And the endometrium, which is highly vascularized and has three components. The innermost layer is composed of simple columnar epithelium, and the middle layer an underlined endometrial stroma, which is a major portion of the endometrium, and endometrial glands which are developed. So this endometrium, which consists of divided into two layers called as stratum functionalis, which is a functional layer which produces which is sloughed off during the menstruation, and the deeper layer is called as stratum basalis. Stratum basalis is a permanent and fixed layer which helps in the production of cervical mucus, and as well as stratum functionalis. Vagina is the axillary structure, which is a tubular structure, which is lined by means of mucous membrane and then extends to the exterior of the body of the uterine cervix, of the to the uterine cervix, which we call it as fornix. Histologically, it consists of squamous, non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium and areolar connective tissue, which that lies in between transverse folds called as rugae. The muscularis is composed of outer circular layer and inner longitudinal layer of smooth muscles, and the adventitia, which is a superficial layer of vagina, which consists of areolar connective tissue. The thin fold of this vascularized mucous membrane is called as a hymen. The vaginal opening to the exterior is called as a vaginal orifice, and sometimes the hymen is completely covers the orifice, called as imperforate hymen. Maybe a surgery is needed. And the next one is ulva or pedundum. Ulva or pedundum. Mons pubis. Mons pubis is the bulged portion of the head portion, starting portion of the vagina. Labia majora and labia minora are the slit-like structures of vagina, which is composed of skin, which is invaginated into the which are invaginated to form two major lips and minor lips. And the clitoris is corpus cavernosa, which is covered by means of a layer called as skin called as a prepuce, which is similar to the prepuce of the male reproductive system, and glans penis like structure, which is called as glans clitoris. And we'll have glands like skinous glands and bulbourethral glands, and these two glands helps in the lubrication of this particular vagina during the copulation. Coming to the mammary glands are the axillary glands that are present in the female reproductive system, and it is consists of fatty regions, of which will have secretory glands, which are also called as alveoli, which are connected to the mammary ducts. And these mammary ducts, which are fused to form fused to form lactiferous ducts. These lactiferous ducts, which are opens out by means of nipples, and this nipple, which consists of many number of openings, which helps in the ejection of milk after the birth of a baby. And coming to the oogenesis, and before the oogenesis, we'll study about this particular type of process of maturation of follicles. At birth, females will have during the embryonic stage, females will have many number of primary oocytes, which are developed at the embryonic stage itself. Those primary oocytes, of which many of primary oocytes are damaged or destroyed by means of a process called as atresia. Of them, only few cells which are necessary or which are required for a female's reproductive cycle. Of them around 400 primary oocytes, like that, they will be left remained in the ovaries, altogether in both the ovaries. And these oocytes, which they develop into follicles, and these follicles, which they later develop into different stages in the follicles, which helps in the development of ova and release of ova. And the first one is primary follicle or primordial follicle, which consists of a primary oocyte surrounded by means of follicular cells, which forms later into granulosa cells, and it is surrounded by means of basement membrane, outer and layer of stromal cells. This converted into primary follicle. Primary follicle, how it is converted means the primary oocyte is remains as it is, but the basement membrane, which consists of follicular cells, which is divided in large number, they form into granulosa cells. So the layer of basement membrane which is present around the primary oocyte is called as zona pellucida, and after the granulosa cells there is a layer called as basement membrane, we call it as such, and outermost layer stroma cells, they are present as it is. We call them as theca folliculi. And there will be a space, I mean, by destruction of these particular cells, granulosa cells, some of the granulosa cells inside the primary follicle, it forms a small space. We call it as when the space appears, then it is called as antrum. So then it becomes secondary follicle. Outside the Sertoli cells, stromal cells, which it forms into two layers, like theca externa and theca interna. And there will be a layers which forms, I mean, layer of cells which forms around the zona pellucida is called as corona radiata. And then later the antrum will increase in its size. The antrum will increase in its size, leading to the formation of mature graphene follicle. Though coming to the gametes, formation of gametes in ovaries is called as oogenesis. So early in the, I mean, as we discussed, like early fetal development itself, they will have so many oogonia which are migrated into the yolk sac, and even before the birth, some of the germ cells will undergo degeneration by a process called as atresia. And there are different types of follicles in a woman's life cycle, proper to lifetime. Primary follicles, secondary follicles. Primary follicles, which consists of granulosa cells, zona pellucida, and theca folliculi. In whereas secondary follicles, it consists of theca externa, which produces estrogens, and theca interna, which produces estrogens, and theca externa, which has stromal cells and collagenous fibers. And the secondary follicle, we also have antrum, corona radiata, and mature graphene follicle, which consists of first polar body that we will see now, and the secondary oocyte. Here, the primary oogonia or oogonium in the fetal stage, which undergoes mitosis to produce primary oocyte. And this primary oocyte are also called as primary oocyte, which it enters into the primordial follicle. And this primordial follicle, which it later develops, which are present, these primary oocytes, when it come into the childhood, many will be degenerated by means of atresia, and when it enters into the pubertal stage, this primary oocyte remains as it is, but the primary follicle or primordial follicle, which it forms or which it develops into primary follicle. Here we can see the primary follicle, and this primary follicle has primary oocyte, and when it becomes the secondary follicle, the primary oocyte starts to divide and produces secondary oocyte and polar body. First polar body. These two are present in the mature graphene follicle. So in females releases only secondary oocyte, not ova. The secondary oocyte will be released out through the ovulation. The process of release of secondary oocyte out of the ovary is called as ovulation. At this time, the secondary oocyte is also in diploid condition. And when it enters, so here we have first polar body and secondary oocyte. First polar body is nothing but remnants of some nuclear material. So it is of vestigial, which is destroyed in the ovary later. And the secondary oocyte, which is released into the ova, which is released from the ova by means of ovulation, enters into the fallopian tubules. Once sperm cell comes in contact and gets fertilized, it divides and it completes its second meiotic division and forms into ovum and secondary polar body. And this primary polar body produces into two polar bodies, which may later gets destroyed. So here the development of meiosis. Here also we can study the oogonym to primary oocyte, where meiosis 1 occurs, which leads to the formation of secondary oocyte and first polar body. After ovulation, secondary oocyte gets fertilized and releases secondary polar body, and after that it becomes zygote. The female reproductive cycle. In the female reproductive cycle, hormonal regulation. At least 6 different of estrogens will be produced by females, and in a non-pregnant woman, most abundant estrogen is beta estradiol, and estrogen, relaxin, and inhibin are produced by the ovaries. How the hormonal control? Gonadotropin releasing hormone, which are secreted from hypothalamus, which releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates the anterior pituitary to produce follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone acts on the primary follicle and helps in the development of mature follicles, whereas luteinizing hormone acts on the cells. Graphene follicle or mature follicle leads to the ovulation, and also formation of corpus luteum, which they later secretes different types of hormones like progesterone, relaxin, and inhibin. And follicle stimulating hormone acts on the stromal cells, theca interna, which produces hormones called as inhibin and estrogen. So estrogen helps in the development of female sexual characters, and also increases the protein anabolism, lowers the blood cholesterol, and maintains or inhibits the levels of FSH and LH and GNH. These estrogens, when their level rises, automatically hypothalamus stops the production of gonadotropin releasing hormone and further release of follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone. And even it stops the follicle stimulating hormone by forming a feedback loop. And inhibin also inhibits the production of luteinizing hormone. Progesterone helps in the maintenance of uterus, whereas relaxin during the time of parturition helps in the relaxation of smooth muscles and skeletal muscles, and inhibin helps in the decrease or control of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Coming to the female phase of reproductive cycle. Female reproductive cycle, which consists of different phases, and they are menstrual phase, pre-ovulatory phase, ovulatory phase, and post-ovulatory phases. Maybe they are also called as follicular phase, menstrual phase, follicular phase, and luteal phase. Menstrual phase is as usual normal menstrual phase, and follicular phase consists of pre-ovulatory and ovulatory phases, and it also called as a proliferatory phase. And the next one is secretory phase, are also called as a luteal phase, which consists of post-ovulatory phase. Of course, they are all common. And in the menstrual phase, the event that occurs in the ovaries are primordial follicles develop into primary follicles by the action of FSH and then into secondary follicles. Whereas in uterus, 50 to 150 ml of blood and tissue fluid and mucus will be shred off by the destruction of endothelium. And pre-ovulatory phase, which is present in proliferatory phase and follicular phase. In ova, it is called as follicular phase. In uterus, it is called as proliferative phase. Both together called as pre-ovulatory phase. In pre-ovulatory phase, which lasts from 6 to 13 days in a 28-day cycle. In pre-ovulatory phase, small amount of blood that sometimes leaks into the pelvic cavity, and in follicular phase the secondary follicle gets develops into secondary follicle, and then secondary follicle into mature graphene follicle. And in the uterus there will be construction of a stratum functionalis layer in endometrium by the estrogen. And the next one is ovulatory phase. Ovulatory phase is the occurs on 14th day, exactly half day, exactly half of the cycle, 14th day in a 28-day cycle. So during the release of ova, small amount of blood is released into the pelvic cavity, which symbolizes the ovulatory phase. So the ovulation occurs by means of LH. LH, when it acts on the graphene follicle, it releases ova. So it is called as ovulatory phase. And in uterus, it keeps on growing by means of estrogen. When the ova is produced, it is called as ovulation. And in the post-ovulatory phase, the graphene follicle, ruptured graphene follicle, which it becomes corpus luteum. Corpus luteum, which is present in the secretory phase, which produces progesterone and little amount of estrogens. Progesterone, which helps in the maintenance, which will not further grow the uterus, but which helps in the maintenance of uterus, for acts as a receptacle for fertilized egg. And this is called as post-ovulatory phase. And if there is no fertilization occurs, then the corpus luteum becomes corpus albicans, a white colored scar like structure in the ovary called as corpus albicans, which stops the production of progesterone. So when the progesterone levels are stopped, automatically the endometrium gets shred off, and it is called as menstrual phase. So enters into the menstrual phase. Here we can see the different phases like menstrual phase, so pre-ovulatory phase, or pre-ovulatory phase, and follicular phase, or ovulatory phase, and secretory phase. By this we have completed the reproductive system in human anatomy and physiology.